Hi, my name is Simon and I have anger problems. I thought I had dealt with them, but it turned out that I was only suppressing them. As a child, I had court-ordered anger management therapy and medication, but that's all behind me now, and the records are sealed. I've always been a fighter. Growing up in a family of 6 children makes you the smallest of the litter. My parents were hard-working, salt-of-the-earth people, but big believers in the school of harsh parenting. It happened to all of us kids. Even with girls. If we crossed the line, we received a painful reminder and abruptly returned to our place. We children also fought. Being the youngest and smallest, I often found myself at the bottom of the pile, and so had to rely on my wits and dirty tricks to gain the upper hand. I was so good at this that my older brothers were wary of getting into a one-on-one fight with me. But we still quarreled and argued, as brothers and sisters should. I sound like I lived in an abusive home, but that's far from true. We all loved each other, and if anyone spoiled a relationship with anyone in my family, he would answer me. The same applied to any of us. But within the family, we had the usual problems that a low-income family faces trying to make ends meet. Let me introduce my family. Mom, whose real name was Mary Beth, but I would never dare use it even now, was an amazing woman. Thin as a whip, with a stern face and delicate features. She ruled the house and was the person who was most often punished. Even Dad got out of her way when she was angry. She ran the house and looked after us children, and in the mornings, she worked as a cleaner in elite houses on the other side of the city. I've never seen this woman sit still. She was always on the move. Dad, real name Daryl, wasn't a particularly big man, 5'8" in, but by God he was strong. There was nothing he couldn't move. He worked as a mechanic at a local car depot, servicing their fleet of trucks. Sometimes he would drive if there weren't enough drivers, and it was a rare but very welcome privilege to go on a trip with him. Usually these were fairly local trips, but never overnight. Most of all, I remember its smell. He always smelled like diesel. Bella was the eldest child, and 8 years older than me. Then Tom and James appeared, twins who were 6 years older, and David was 4 years older. David was supposed to be the last, but they decided they wanted another girl, and went for it. They were blessed by Mary, only 12 months after David. This was supposed to be the end of their family. However, fate had other plans, and as a result of drunken revelry and a poorly inserted diaphragm, 3 years later, I was born. Do not misunderstand me. Even though I was a mistake, I was not treated any differently or loved less than all my siblings. But I grew up a little apart from them and spent a lot of time alone, playing and exploring the back garden of our house. So to the incident that got me on trial. I was 15 years old at the time and was returning home from school. As I think I mentioned, we weren't rich. In fact, we were very poor and therefore often became the butt of jokes and ridicule. My brothers went through this, but after Bella's first 2 years of school, they always had their siblings to support them. Bella had Tom and James, and they had each other, and when David came to school, Tom and James were still there, and by the time Mary went to school, David was there to look after her, like older brother. By the time I went to school, David had left, and although Mary was there, as a girl she was not strong enough to protect me. Not that I need it. During the first few weeks, I had several fights with older students, and I firmly convinced my peers that messing with me was a bad idea. After every fight, I was sent home with a letter from my parents and punished again for causing trouble. I felt it was unfair, but I knew better than to complain. However, it fueled my rage for the next fight, and I fed off of it. What ultimately led to me being expelled from school and appearing before a judge happened while I was on my way home from school. I was walking along the path, about a mile from our house, when I heard laughing and someone crying. As I approached a slight bend in the road, I saw a group of 4 teenagers surrounding my sister Mary. They had her school bag, and they were throwing it here and there and hurting her sister. I gave vent to my rage. Even though I defended my sister, the prosecution lawyer called me a wild man, an unpredictable and dangerous man. And what I did to those poor innocent boys was beyond my sister's reasonable defense, even if her story were true. The court agreed, and I was placed in juvenile detention until my 18th birthday. And as I said, I was required to undergo mandatory anger management therapy. Before I was taken away, my family was allowed to say goodbye to me. I stood with a bashful face, and my mother looked at me with an even gaze. I could never tell what she was thinking. Then I saw something I had never seen before. A tear rolled down her cheek. She hugged me tightly and whispered in my ear that she was proud of me. I, expecting a reproach, was stunned. I got hugs from Dad and the rest of my family, and even a kiss on the cheek from Beth and Mary, who lingered the longest. Each of them told me how proud they were that I protected my sister. The prison they took me to was halfway across the state, so I didn't expect any of them to visit me. It was difficult in the colony, but you can cope. So far, my life has taught me to take care of myself, and after several run-ins with so-called authorities, they realized that it was easier to leave me alone. That doesn't mean I didn't get picked on or get into fights. I earned enough respect to be left alone. During the last year of my imprisonment, I was surprised to be told that I had visitors, and I was taken to the visitors' room where Beth and a young man were waiting for me. Bella had grown into a striking young woman. Not a beauty, but that was not to be expected given her size. Her face was not as stern as her mother's, but her eyes were the same. She looked at me sadly. The man's name was Gerald, and apparently he was her husband. They had been married for a year, and he was a traveling salesman. He seemed quite nice, but remained silent. "Simon," Bella began, "there's no easy way to do this, so I'll just say it. There was an accident at home. There was a fire. Mom, Dad, and the rest." At that moment, tears filled her eyes, and she began to sob. "They all died." She hugged me and started crying on my shoulder. Gerald stood nearby, clumsily patting her on the back and muttering something inarticulate. I didn't hug Bella. I just stood there and looked at her, feeling nothing. Finally, the guards separated us, and after another hour of visiting, Bella and Gerald left. It would be several years before I would see Bella again. Thus passed the years of my imprisonment. Twice weekly anger management sessions, supplemented by medications that I soon learned to swallow and spit out whenever I was alone, seemed to cure my anger, and on my 18th birthday, I was declared fit to go out into society. While I was in prison, I received a matriculation certificate, and my personal file was closed. I had a blank slate. I was given $200 and a bus ticket to the nearest town, and don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. I didn't stay in the local town, but changed my bus ticket and drove across the state line. Everyone knew that the local colony was releasing its prisoners into the local town, so there was no getting around it. However, when I came to Jacksonville, Ohio, I started over with a clean slate. I told people that I was forced to leave the city due to a fire that killed my family, and that without family and friends, I decided to try to build my future in a new city. Soon I found a job in a small auto repair shop, housing, and began to rebuild my life. I worked hard. My upbringing did not allow anything else, and after a while I was allowed to do more. Apparently, I had inherited my father's mechanical aptitude and found the work easy and enjoyable. My abilities were noticed, and I was sent on a day-exempt course, and after just 6 years, I became a qualified mechanic. My life was back to normal, and I was enjoying life. The owner of the auto repair shop, Mike, was only 5 years older than me, but managed to get married successfully. His wife had money, and she provided him with money to start a business. I found their relationship a little strange. When we were alone, he was a wonderful character, full of jokes and not averse to telling jokes. However, when Stephanie was around, he was much more reserved and always obeyed her. Stephanie, on the other hand, was wonderful. 2 years younger than Mike, she had long brown hair and bright green eyes. She never lost her head and flirted with everyone, even with me. I found it awkward at first, and I even brought it up with Mike for fear that he would think I was trying to interfere with his marriage. He laughed at that. "She just likes to be the center of attention," he said. 3 years later, tragedy struck when Mike died in a workshop accident. I left the shop for a road test and returned to find the sheriff and local fire department trying to extricate him, but it was already too late. The day after the funeral, his widow came to my apartment. The workshop was closed after the accident, both out of need for an investigation and out of respect. Mike's death was ruled accidental. He was supposed to be using stands to support the car, but he was in a hurry to finish the job and took a chance. This surprised me, as I had never seen him do this before, but we all take shortcuts from time to time. "Simon," she said, "we need to talk." I invited her to come in. She got straight to the point. "I need you to take charge of the workshop," she said. "What?" I was surprised. "I'm a mechanic. I don't have enough knowledge to run a business." "Mike didn't know when we met either," she answered. "I'm studying business, and I taught him how to run a workshop. I'll do the same for you. The city needs a repair shop. Otherwise, people will have to travel miles to get repairs done. You need a job, and I need a man to run the workshop. I don't know anything about renovations. We can do this together. What do you say?" I thought for a few minutes. "How will it work?" "As you know, I helped Mike set up the business, so we were partners. He contributed part of the capital, and I provided the rest. After you showed up, he had enough free time to manage the workshop, as well as just work in it. So I retired and left you boys alone. This year we were going to start a family." Her eyes filled with tears, and I unconsciously hugged her. She cried quietly for a while, and then made a conscious effort to pull herself together. "What I propose is a partnership. I know how much Mike has paid you over the years, and I also know that you just don't spend the money. I assume you have some stock?" She looked at me questioningly. "I have some money," I answered a little warily. "I'm not going to steal your money," she said, laughing a little. "I just need you to buy a share of the business, so you can become a partner. We can then make a share of the business part of your new salary package, so that over the course of a few years, you own a larger and larger share. If you want to eventually buy me out completely, I'll be open to that, but I really like being a co-owner, so if you don't want that, I'll be happy with that too." "What if I don't want to be the owner?" I asked. "I think I'll have to find a buyer for it, but I have no idea who it will be or whether they'll want to keep you on staff after the sale." She said sadly, "I wouldn't like to lose everything. I've already lost Mike. Please don't let me lose the workshop and you too," she begged. "Lose me?" I thought. "Can you give me a little time to think about this?" I asked. "Of course," she said. "I have prepared several documents for you. If you decide to take action, you should contact a lawyer. Please think about it. I need your help." I know Mike wouldn't want the workshop to be sold. I felt like it was a little unfair, but I also knew she was right. Mike would not want the workshop to be sold to a stranger, to an outsider. Wasn't I an outsider? I lived in the city for only 9 years. In small-town America, you're considered an outsider if your grandfather wasn't born in that town, so how did I get accepted like that now? I remembered all the people I had met and the friends I had made since I came to town. As I said, I worked hard and tried to fit in. It made life easier. If I could help someone, I would. I had provided services to the town's residents on numerous occasions, and coupled with the fact that I worked for Mike, always did a good job fixing their cars, we didn't just fix cars, and was always polite and respectful, I seemed to be accepted into the community. I didn't go drinking or cause trouble. I had a great relationship with the town sheriff and his deputies, and I knew almost everyone by name. This city has become my home. I tried asking girls out a couple of times, but due to my complete lack of experience with the opposite sex during my formative years, I felt awkward around women. There were a couple of older married women who, hearing rumors that I had never had a woman, decided it was their duty to relieve me of this burden, but I found their behavior predatory and repulsive. I knew how my mother would want me to behave, and even though she was no longer around, her presence in my heart kept me in control. I looked at the documents Stephanie left me, but they didn't make much sense to me, so I called one of my friends, Lee Granger, who was an attorney, and asked him if he could look them up for me. "I can," he said, "but since I am already acting on behalf of Stephanie, I would advise you to get independent advice." The following Tuesday, I made the 90-minute drive to Columbus. I found the lawyer's number online and made an appointment using the online appointment form. I must say that I didn't recognize her right away. It was only when the secretary in the lawyer's office came out from behind the table and hugged me that it dawned on me. My arms instinctively closed around her. The sound of throat clearing behind me separated us. "Jonathan," the secretary said to the man who was looking at me from across the office, "I'd like to introduce you to Simon, my brother." That's how Bella came back into my life. After the first meeting, I explained to Jonathan why I was here. "I'll tell you what," he said, looking at the contract for a couple of seconds. "Bella, why don't you take Simon back to the house and make him dinner? Take the afternoon and get things done. I'll look into this and I have some other things to do. Meet me at home for lunch." While we were having lunch, Bella told me that her marriage to Gerald, an insurance salesman, had lasted only a year after I met them. Because of his traveling life and weekly absences from home, she felt abandoned. She suspected him of cheating while he was traveling, but never found any evidence. When she told him she wanted a divorce, he simply shrugged and signed the papers. A week later, she moved out and hasn't seen him since. 6 months later, she came to Columbus in search of work and got a job as a secretary in a law office. The previous secretary had retired. Over the next 2 years, Jonathan became close, became a couple, and finally got married. A year later, she gave birth to a child, Mary. Twins, James and David, were born a year later. Mary was 6 years old, the boys were 5, and all 3 were due home from school in about 45 minutes. We finished lunch and I enlightened Bella about my life after release. The door burst open with a bang and 3 tornadoes flew into the room. They froze when they saw me sitting with Bella, eyes wide and mouths open. As soon as we were introduced, and I learned that I would be called Uncle Simon, I found myself in the backyard playing catch with the boys. Mary was much more reserved than the boys and sat with Mom watching us. Jonathan came home after 5 and handed me the contract. "Sign it," he said simply. "You won't get anything better than what she offers." I thanked him and asked how much I owed for his work, but received a slap on the back of the head from Bella. "The family doesn't take money from the family," she said. I looked at Jonathan, who simply shrugged. "I leave our finances in Bella's hands." "Well, I know the workshop is quite far from here, but if you need anything, I can help you," I said. After dinner, I left, a 90-minute drive after all, and returned to my apartment, clutching the signed contract and ready to tell Stephanie the news. The next day, I decided to open a workshop. There were still free work boxes there, and people in the city were counting on us to be able to get their equipment working. The hardest job was finishing the car Mike was working on when the jack collapsed. The work itself wasn't difficult, but when I climbed under that car, knowing that's where Mike died, it gave me the chills. Stephanie arrived before lunch, and I told her the news. She squealed with delight and hugged me, telling me that I wouldn't regret it and that we would make a very good team. Over the next 2 years, everything went as usual for us. I worked in the workshop and Stephanie worked in the office. Every week is spent half a day working with her, learning how to run a business, completing all the necessary paperwork, making sure all licenses and insurance are up to date, balance and pay taxes. There was a lot to learn. In addition to working during the day, I spent several hours every evening on online courses, trying to fill the gaps in my education. Every weekend I went to Bella's Jonathan and children. I usually spent my weekends with them, staying on the folding bed. I helped around the house, played with the children, and got to know my brother-in-law. He seemed like a very nice guy. One evening, Stephanie came into the workshop as I was closing. "Simon," she said, "we need to talk." "Okay," I said. "Can I take a shower first?" I spent the whole day lying under the tractor. She nodded to me. "Go take a shower and then meet me at my house in an hour," she said. I was a little nervous when I rang the bell at her house. I didn't expect anything good from a conversation that started with, "We need to talk," and wondered what was wrong. When she opened the door, I was greeted by a delicious smell. "I cooked us dinner because I didn't think you'd already eaten," she said. We sat down at the table and began to eat delicious meatloaf with greens and potatoes. While we were eating, she said, "Simon, I'm not sure our partnership is working. she said. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. About. That's all I could come up with. I wondered what I had done wrong. Maybe I'm just not cut out to be an owner. I tried really hard to learn everything I needed to and thought I was doing well, but Stephanie obviously didn't think so. Am I doing something wrong? I asked. Well, Stephanie said, frankly, yes. I sighed. I'm sorry. I thought I was doing well. There's just so much work to do in the workshop. I try to keep up with work, and there are other things to do. I took classes in the evenings to try to learn. That's just my point of view, she said softly. You work your ass off. You already do more than the person who just does repairs in the workshop. Then we spend time together doing office work. Then you go home and take courses in the evenings. When was the last time you had a day off? When was the last time you went on a date? When was the last time you had sex? It's good that I managed to put down my glass of juice when she asked the last question. Otherwise, she might have gotten it in the face. I lowered my eyes, blushing. She stared at me with her mouth open. Oh, my God, she said. I heard rumors, but I thought... I started to get up. My embarrassment began to turn into anger. Wait, Simon, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. In my stupid, clumsy way, I was trying to tell you that I was worried about you. You need to get some rest. Apart from visiting your sister, you do nothing but work and sleep. No one can continue like this forever. You are facing a crisis, and I, as your business partner, cannot afford this. And as your friend, I am worried about you. I sat back down in my seat, my anger and embarrassment gone. She was right. I'm tired to the core. Sure, I increased my share of the garage and things were going well, but I was working 12 out of every 14 days, at least 14 hours a day. I worked, went home, took a shower, ate while working on the computer, and slept. Everything was repeated again and again. I couldn't remember the last time I did something just for myself. That's what we're going to do. First, we will take someone into the workshop, an assistant if we find the right person, or just a worker, if we cannot. Secondly, you will have at least one free day every week. Even on the weekends when you're not going to see Bella, you'll have at least one day off. Thirdly, you will go out at least once a week. I don't care where you go or with whom you go, but you will go out. As much as I agreed with most of what she said, I never liked ultimatums. Or, I asked, a hint of a growl in my voice. She looked at me, her head tilted slightly to one side. I knew that as the senior partner in the business, she would be well within her rights to sell the business out from under my nose. But I felt that it was better for her not to threaten me. There's no or here, Simon, she said softly. This is not a threat. I guess this could be called an intrusion, but I thought you and I had become good friends. Taking care of each other is what friends do. I sank back into my chair, defeated. Okay, I said quietly. I'm not sure about communication. I haven't met... I paused. Well, I haven't really dated, I guess. What never? She asked incredulously. I shook my head. Have you never dated a girl? Another wiggle. What about the guy? She asked, with a mischievous glint in her eyes. I'm not like that, I said quietly. Have you ever asked a girl out on a date? I tried a couple of times when I first came to town, I said. I crashed and burned. Then I got busy with work, and everything faded into the background. I received several invitations from older women, but they were married, and my mother would skin me alive if I got involved in someone else's marriage. She looked at me confused. I thought you said that your mother died. Believe me, death won't stop her. Plus, Bella hits just as hard. She giggled. Oh, you poor hen, she said, but there was calculation in her eyes. I'll tell you what. Why don't I give you a date this Friday? I know a girl who has been interested in you for a long time, but is afraid to ask you out. I'm sure you'll like it. Who is she? I asked. I knew almost every person in town and couldn't think of a single woman my age who showed interest in you. She said, this will be interesting. Choose a meeting place and I will ask her to meet you there on Friday at 8 p.m. Since you were at Bella's last weekend, that means this weekend is free, so if the date goes well, you can spend some time together. I sat and thought about it for a while. What would we do? I asked. I don't drink, I don't know how to dance. How about a movie? She suggested. Take her to the cinema. Here's some advice for you. Let her choose the film herself. What if I don't like her choice? I asked. Then you will broaden your horizons. You might even learn something. Movies about girls are all about romance. Even if you don't like the movie, watch and learn from it. Okay, I said. Tell me, excuse me, what is her name? I thought I could catch her. She laughed. Nice try. I'll tell her to meet you at the cinema at... She looked at her phone for several minutes. It must be 7:30, otherwise you will not have time to buy tickets before the start of the show. We finished dinner, and I helped with the dishes. When I left, she hugged me. Don't forget about Friday at 7:30, be kin to her. Lately, she's been having a bad time, and she needs someone good. The rest of the week was spent in work, more work, and worry. As Friday approached, I became more and more nervous. By 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon, I was so nervous that I felt physically ill. Stephanie was working in the office, and I kept wanting to go in and ask her to cancel the date. I stood and looked at the alternator I had just installed on the car before realizing that it was the same alternator I had removed, and the new one was still in its box on the workbench. "Simon!" came a voice from behind me. I jumped. Stephanie stood there smirking at me. Go home, take a shower, change clothes, and get ready. I'm not sure I can... I began. Of course you can. Trust me, she's just as nervous as you are, but I think she's a wonderful woman, and you two will get along very well. But, I began, I don't know how to talk to girls. What if I say something that upsets her? I've never been good at reading signals. What if I think she likes me and does something, but I don't, and she thinks I'm trying? I was starting to panic. She put her hand on my hand. Listen, you'll be fine. Everyone has these doubts before a first date, especially before your first date. Relax, be yourself, and have fun. Everything else will follow by itself. I started putting my tools away before closing for the evening. By the way, she said, don't bring flowers. No need? I asked. I thought it was mandatory on the first date. What's she going to do with that damn thing in the theater? You can buy her candy and popcorn when you come in, if you want to give her something. I turned to leave. How am I, anyway? I can recognize her? I can't just walk up to random women and ask if they're my date. I will most likely be arrested. Oh, believe me, you will recognize her. She smiled. But she knows you. So if you're not sure, just wait and she'll come to you. I went home and took a shower. Then I took a shower again. Working in an auto repair shop means you sometimes get oil, grease, and other engine-related fluids on you, and sometimes they don't want to come off. I always wear protective gloves and coveralls, but the gloves sometimes get torn and the coveralls sometimes get soaked through. And to be honest, some of the cars we deal with are simply disgusting. I looked at my limited wardrobe, trying to figure out what to wear. I chose jeans and a button-down shirt. I'd cut my hair the day before to look at least somewhat decent, and by 6 o'clock I was ready. The drive to the theater was about 20 minutes, so I had plenty of time to sit and worry. I must have picked up the phone a dozen times to ask Stephanie to call her friend and cancel the date. Then, at 6:45, I received a text from Stephanie. If you're holding the phone in your hands, working up the courage to call me and ask me to cancel the meeting, then don't bother. It will happen. Make sure you show up on time. My friend doesn't like being kept waiting. I arrived at the cinema at 7:15 and parked the car. As I approached the checkout counter, I looked around but didn't see anyone waiting. I decided to go look at the billboards for the films currently showing to see what was showing. Walking along the row of boards, I read each of them, occasionally glancing around to make sure I didn't miss my time. My watch was slowly creeping towards 8:30. Suddenly, I felt someone's presence next to me and turned around. It took my breath away. Stephanie stood there, her brown hair pulled back into a simple ponytail. She was wearing jeans so tight They could easily be mistaken for body paint and a loose emerald green shirt over a white t-shirt. I was confused. She came to tell me that her friend decided to cancel the meeting. Then she took my hand. "Let's go," she said. "Otherwise, we'll miss the beginning." I was right. She chose a chick flick. I tried to pretend that I was interested in the film. I even tried to do as she suggested and watch how the main character has affairs with women, but the dialogue seemed banal and cliché to me. Of course, such lines don't work, do they? About a third of the way through the movie, I felt Stephanie press her hand to me. Thinking I was taking up too much space, I pulled back slightly to give her more space. She looked at me with a "seriously" on her face, then reached out, took my hand and put my hand on her shoulders, pressing herself against me. For a long time, I didn't even dare to breathe. Then she leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Relax, I won't hurt you." I didn't remember the rest of the movie. After the movie, Stephanie said she was hungry, so we went to a diner to get something to eat. It was at least more convenient for me. To begin with, there was a table between us, and as soon as we started talking, I relaxed significantly. I asked her about the parts of the film that I remembered and whether the pickup lines used had an effect on her. By the time we finished our meal, we were laughing together, and I felt much better. Stephanie took a taxi to the cinema. We changed seats, and I took her home. Being the gentleman I was raised to be, I walked over and opened her door to let her out of my truck. She took my arm to accompany her to her door. "Thank you for the evening," she said. "I really had a good time." She leaned over and kissed me on the lips. "Good night, Simon." She entered the house and closed the door. I stood for a long time and looked at the door. I was so conflicted. She was a beautiful woman and left no doubt that she was interested in me. But in my head, she was still Mike's wife. I knew it was ridiculous since he had been dead for over a year now, and as far as I knew, she hadn't dated anyone else in that time. But still. I got back in my pickup and drove home. The next morning, I was getting ready to go to the workshop at 8 o'clock when the phone rang. It was Stephanie. "Good morning," I said. "How are you?" "What are you doing right now?" she asked. "Just getting ready for opening," I said. "No," she said. "Get dressed. We're going for a ride." There was a knock on my door. "Wait, Steph, someone is at my door," I said, walking up to the door and opening it. She stood there and grinned at me. "No," she said again. "You can't ride in overalls. Go change clothes." She took me to a ranch and hour outside of town. "My friend keeps horses here," she said. "I come here to ride whenever I have the opportunity." I began. "Don't worry," she said. "I'll teach you how to ride a horse." She turned away, but I was sure I heard her say, "and on horses," half to herself. We had a fun day. The horse she chose for me was calm and docile, but just followed her horse, so I didn't have much control. She packed a picnic, and we ate on a blanket on the hillside. After we ate, she lay on her back and looked at the clouds. "Look," she said, "a dog." She pointed to a cloud that, if you could imagine, might look like a very deformed dog. I decided not to comment. I looked at the sky for a long time, watching the passing clouds. It was relaxing lying next to Stephanie. She kissed me. We pulled away from each other. I could hardly catch my breath. "I'm very sorry," she said, looking not at all like usual. "I just couldn't resist." "Stephanie?" I asked. "What are we doing?" She looked at me a little puzzled. "What do you mean?" she asked. "You know, I began, but she put her fingers to my lips. "Shh," she said. "There is nothing wrong." "I'm just so confused," I said. "Where does it lead?" "You'll have to tell me because I have no idea, and I'm blind when it comes to reading women. Are we just fooling around? Is it just fun or something more? How far are we going to go? Because right now I am full of thoughts, feelings, and desires that are pulling me in different directions. Emotionally, I guess I'm a little behind the times. Until 30 seconds ago, I had never even kissed a girl I wasn't involved with, and I had never kissed a girl like that. Stephanie lay down again, this time resting her head on my chest. I'm sorry to tell you that I can't answer these questions, she said. You see, this doesn't make it any easier. Yes, I have more experience than you. I've had several boyfriends and been married, but this, whatever it is as new and uncertain to me as it is to you. I am also full of the same thoughts and feelings, and attractions, she giggled. But I can't say where we're going, she continued. I miss Mike now, but I know that he is gone and will not return. And I can't spend the rest of my life alone just because he's gone. Since we've worked so much together, I've developed feelings for you that I'd like to explore. But where this research will lead us, we will have to find out together, if you don't mind. But why me? You know I've never been with a woman. Don't you want someone who knows how to... I began. If that kiss was anything significant, I'm sure you'll learn quickly. But as I said, we will both learn. Making love to someone is a very individual thing. What one person likes, another will hate. When we are ready, I will teach you, and you will teach me. We're not ready for this yet, and we may never be. But for now, let's stop thinking about the destination and enjoy the journey. She leaned in again, and we kissed again, and again, we were interrupted. It's time for us to go back, she said. After returning, we spent time brushing the horses, and then released them into the field. I need a shower, I said. I smell like a horse. From then on, every Friday evening, we did something together. We went to the movies, had dinner. She even talked me into going dancing with her, and I discovered that I couldn't embarrass myself too much on the dance floor. On weekends, when I wasn't at Bella's, we would spend Saturday or Sunday together and do something. We walked or went somewhere. We even went to a few car shows when they weren't too far away. We spent a lot of time kissing, and I got a good look at her body and clothes. About 3 months later, we returned to her house after spending a day at the local car show. I was a little disappointed as the exhibition was quite sparse and the exhibits were of a low standard, but I managed to find the part for the customer's car that I was looking for. Not all of my clients had new cars, or even cars for which new parts were still available. As usual, I opened the truck door for her and walked her to the door. She invited me in, which was nothing unusual. We often had dinner after walks, but I felt that something had changed today. I turned to close the front door, and when I turned around, Stephanie was standing right in front of me, so close that I reflexively stepped back, pressing my back against the door. She kissed me, then she pulled back and looked into my eyes. "Sorry, Simon," she said. "I cannot wait any longer. I don't know how to describe the rest of the night. We made love, but it was the best night of my life. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to ruin everything with stupid words." She seemed to read my thoughts. "There are no words after this," she said. "Sleep, and let's see what tomorrow brings." Our relationship also developed outside the bedroom. We became a couple. We got engaged. We got married. And that's when everything started to change. Now I know that there will be those who will call me a rag, a cunt, and all sorts of other names when I tell you how everything developed. They will argue that in the same circumstances, they would have done this or that, and they would never have allowed events to develop the way they did. We got married in the spring, Jonathan at my side, and Mary and the twins in a ceremony I didn't really understand. It was, of course, a big wedding. Almost everyone we knew came. That is, the whole city. The bill was phenomenal, but as I said, Stephanie had the money. And by this time, the workshop was doing well. I was almost an equal partner and had more than recouped my initial investment. The trustees of Stephanie's foundation insisted on a prenuptial agreement, which was presented to me for my signature. It was only their attitude towards me that prompted me to say that I would look into this case with my lawyer and return it to them. It turned out that this was the right decision because it was completely one-sided. If I had been unfaithful to Stephanie, I would have walked away with what I put into the marriage and a small amount for each year of our marriage. However, if the positions were reversed, the prenuptial agreement would have no force, and I would be subject to ordinary divorce laws. In other words, I would be completely screwed and most likely lose everything. I received a family discount again from Jonathan and left him to negotiate a fairer agreement directly with the trustees. I moved in with Stephanie before we got married. We hired an assistant and a worker in the workshop, which was growing well, and I was as happy as I could have hoped. The only thing that would have made me even happier was if Stephanie had told me we were expecting a baby, but even though she stopped taking the pills, that didn't happen. 3 months after our wedding, small events began to happen. As I mentioned earlier, when Mike was alive, Stephanie was always a flirt, but that stopped after he died. And during our courtship, she gave me all her attention, and she always behaved decently around other men. It didn't happen right away, but gradually I began to notice that she was returning to her flirting ways. I think the first time I really noticed, again, as I said, a gradual process, was one night when we went dancing. She liked to do this at least once a month. We had already danced together several times, but then a large, well-groomed man whom I had never seen before came up to her and asked if she wanted to dance. On all previous occasions, she looked at me when this happened, and I always replied that if she wanted, then I did not mind. This time, everything was different. Without looking in my direction, she took his hand, stood up, and walked out onto the floor. They danced a couple of fast numbers, but then the pace slowed down and they moved much closer than I would have liked. I decided to intervene. I tapped him on the shoulder and he turned around, pursing his lips. "I think now I'd like my wife back," I said coldly. I saw him contemplating his next move and mentally prepared myself for the blow that I fully expected from him. But then he smiled and stepped back. "Of course," he said, and then turned to Stephanie. "Thanks for the dance." "What the hell was that?" Stephanie was furious. "We didn't even finish the dance." She simply turned and left the bar. I was stunned. Why was it my fault that this scoundrel couldn't keep his hands to himself? "I didn't like the way he treated you," I said. "And what?" she said. "It's my ass and I can take care of myself. I don't need you to tell me who I can dance with and who I can't." "So you wouldn't mind if I danced with some other woman and wrapped my arms around her?" I asked hotly. She laughed. "Do you think that because we had sex several times, you have some idea about women? Dream on." She burst into our bedroom, and I heard her close the door. It was cold all weekend, and I slept in one of the guest rooms. I tried to talk to her several times, but she simply ignored me or left the room. Finally, I decided that I must have overreacted. When I got home Monday night, I apologized. I thought I saw a sparkle of triumph flash in her eyes, but it disappeared so quickly that I couldn't be sure. She hugged me. "Simon, you know that I love you, but you are my husband, not a jailer. I danced with some guy, so what? If he went further than I wanted, I would deal with it. Don't you see that by your intervention, you told him that you were worried that I might go astray? If he thinks that way, how much more likely is he to come back and try again? If you let me deal with him, he would understand where the boundaries are." I thought about this for a moment. This made some sense. "I'm sorry," I said again, and everything seemed to calm down. Things started to change in the bedroom, too. Now I understand how naive I was. It was 6 months after the wedding when I found her pills. I reached into her bag for something, it seemed like a pen, and found half a pack of pills. At first, I thought they must have been left before we started trying for a baby and didn't say anything. But a couple of days later, while she was in the shower, I looked again and saw that 2 more pills had disappeared. Apparently, she was still using them. At first, I was going to show her the box of pills, but I realized that this would not lead to anything good. Every time we had any argument, I lost. She would just stop talking to me and ignore me until I apologized. Yes, we often had great make-up sex after that, but only after I gave in. One day I talked to Bella about this, and she asked if I remember Mom and Dad ever arguing. I thought about it. I never remember them quarreling. Dad simply agreed with what Mom said. He said, "Happy wife, happy life." "But, of course, you can't live like that," I said. "We should be partners, not master and servant." Bella looked at me. "I remember one argument between Mom and Dad," she said. "It was because of you." "Me?" I said. "This was before you were born. You always knew you weren't planned. But I hope that through it all, Did you ever feel like Ma and Pa treated you differently than the rest? She asked. No, I grinned. I received the same punishments as everyone else. Some of them are from you, I remembered. And you deserve them all. She grinned in response. But you must remember, she continued, how poor we were. We had nothing and were barely surviving. When she was 7 months pregnant with you, your mother returned home with a man. Apparently, she decided they couldn't afford to have another child, and although it was never a thought that she wouldn't give birth, she made inquiries about adopting you. This man was from an adoption agency, and he came to talk to Pa. Pa just sat and listened to what the man had to say, thanked him and said that he was wasting his time. There was no way they would give up their child for adoption. He showed the man the exit. Mom was furious. You know what she was like when she was angry? She called him every name I had ever heard, and some I had never heard. She told him what a fool he was, how he had doomed them all to starve or live in poverty for the rest of their lives, how they couldn't handle the extra mouth to feed and all the expenses of a new baby. She went on and on. During all this, Pa just looked at her. When she screamed, he just came over and hugged her. He told her that they would never part with their child, that no matter what, the child will grow up in a loving home and will live in his own family. They can handle it. They will be fine. That was the end of the argument, and you know the rest. You see, Dad never argued with Mom because there was never anything he felt strongly enough about to argue about. He trusted his mother to make the right decisions and therefore followed her lead. Apparently, he thought her decision about you was wrong, and so he did something about it. So, you think I need to pick my battles to decide if the problem is big enough to fight for? Yes, she said. But rest assured, because judging by her behavior, she seems to be a stubborn woman. If you decide to oppose it, it could be the end of your marriage. I think she's willing to go that far to get her way, so you need to be confident too. Are you and Jonathan arguing? I asked. No, came a voice from behind me. I just do what I'm told. She smiled warmly at him. As it should be, she said. I decided to talk to Stephanie as if I hadn't found the pills. Stephanie, I think I need to go to the doctor, I said one morning as we were getting ready. Why? She asked, looking worried. Is something wrong? No, I feel fine, I reassured her. But we've been trying to have a baby for several months now, and nothing is happening. Maybe I need to get checked. Maybe there's something wrong with me. She smiled softly at me. Baby, everything takes time. Be patient. Let's wait a few more months, and if nothing happens, then maybe we can talk to Dr. Smith. We're both young and healthy. I'm sure it will happen. I nodded sadly. She was clearly lying to me, but I didn't understand why. I remembered my conversation with Bella. Should I confront her about the pills? This would definitely cause an argument. I have already heard her accusing me of spying on her and violating her personal space. Perhaps she wanted to wait a little longer with the children. Perhaps she didn't think she was ready yet. I decided that I would give her a year to get herself in order, and then we would discuss children again. Besides, while she thought I thought we were trying... A few weeks later, Stephanie told me that her friends had invited her. She agreed because she knew that I didn't particularly like to dance. And so it became a regular thing. Every Friday evening she went out with the girls. At first she was home by 11, but gradually it became later and later until some weekends I would go to Bella's before she got home. Our sex life was changing more and more. She became even more demanding in the bedroom. I couldn't even talk to Bella about it. Who would discuss such things with their older sister? Once again, I decided that this was not enough to divorce her, so I got used to it. About 3 months later, she returned home from one of her girls' nights out. She was a little drunk, but it was quite early for her, just after midnight. I had already gone to bed, but she woke me up and we made love. When I came to, Stephanie had already gone to the bathroom and was taking a shower. I was still in a sleepy state, but the same thing was running through my head. Her words about another man. Did this really happen? I felt nauseous. Was it possible that it was just a fantasy running through her head? I decided that in the future, I would need to watch her much more closely. A week later, I returned home from the workshop to find Stephanie sitting at the kitchen table with several papers spread out in front of her. "What is all this?" I asked. "A business proposal?" she answered, without taking her eyes off the papers. "From whom?" "There is one guy. His name is Danforth Evans. He plans to become a financial broker. He needs a business partner, and the trustees of the foundation referred him to me." "We don't know anything about finance," I said. "We have a car repair shop. We may not know, but I know, and the auto repair shop is your brainchild. Now it's working again, and I need something more stimulating. What do you know about this Danforth? How do you know he's not just a scammer trying to drain your trust fund?" She looked at me contemptuously. "Listen, I know that you have taken over the workshop, that you are now running it, and that it is doing well, but don't think that makes you an expert in business. My trustees and I have been investing in business for a long time. I know what I'm doing. You're just worried about your little business." She buried her head in the papers again. Over the next few weeks, she spent a lot of time attending meetings with this Danforth to forge their partnership. Every time I noticed that she seemed to be spending a lot of time with him, she would snap back, saying that building a new business takes time. She reminded me of how much time we spent together building the auto repair shop. I restrained myself from reminding her of the results of spending so much time together. Another month passed before anything else happened, and that was the beginning of the end. I returned from my weekend at Bella's and went into the bedroom to unpack the bag I'd brought with me. I noticed that the linen on the bed had been changed. This seemed strange to me since we only changed it on the Friday before I left. When I looked in the laundry basket, there were no dirty sheets, which was also strange since I usually did my laundry on Sunday to prepare for the week ahead. My mind immediately jumped to a conclusion that I didn't want to think about. I walked back into the living room where Stephanie was sitting, going through more papers. "So, how was your weekend?" I asked quietly. "Okay," she replied. "Papers again?" I said, pointing to the stack that I was sure wasn't there on Friday. "Yes," she answered absently. "Danforth brought them in." I felt my anger begin to rise, but I suppressed it. Just because she said he was here and because the bed had been changed didn't mean what I thought it meant. I needed a lot more evidence if I was going to accuse her of cheating. "Why have I never met Danforth?" I asked. She looked up at me. "He's a business partner. Why do you want to meet him?" she asked. "I just thought it would be nice for us all to get together. Why don't you invite him and his wife to dinner one night?" "Oh, he's not married," she said, "but maybe you're right. How about next Friday?" We made a reservation for 7 o'clock on Friday. Stephanie told me to meet her there, as I would need to go home, shower, and change. She will go straight from the new office. When I arrived, they were already sitting at the table chatting, and I realized that I had met this guy before. This was the asshole who asked Stephanie to dance a couple of months ago. They both stood up as I approached, and Stephanie introduced us. He extended his hand, but the expression on his face was not at all welcoming. It was somewhere between smugness and disgust. I pretended not to notice his hand, kissed Stephanie on the cheek, and nodded to him as I sat down. The meal was painful for me. After the first few minutes, they started talking about business and basically ignored me the entire evening. After the main course, I excused myself, left the restaurant, and went home. I don't know what time Stephanie got home. I expected her to wake me up with an argument. But when I woke up the next morning, she was asleep in bed, but as far away from me as possible so as not to fall out of it. I decided that I needed to talk to someone, and the obvious person was Bella. It wasn't my day off, but I didn't think she'd mind, so I went into the workshop, left instructions for the guys there, telling them I had errands to run, and headed off to Columbus. When I arrived, Jonathan was mowing the front lawn and looked at me quizzically. "Is your watch going fast?" "You're a week early," he chuckled. Bella saw my pickup truck pull up and got out. She looked at my face and said, "Jonathan, take Simon to the house. I'll take the kids to Mary and be back in half an hour." Jonathan looked at us and obeyed, leading me into a closet and handing me a glass of amber liquid. "Do you want to talk now or wait for Bella?" he asked. "I'm not sure about some of the things I need to talk about." "Look," he said, "neither Bella nor I are naive. We were both already married and had children. Also, don't forget what I do for a living. Bella participates in all my conversations about divorce, so she has heard a lot of things that would make even a woman of easy virtue blush. But she's my sister," I said, "and this means that she loves you and will not judge you. I'm not saying you won't get hit on the head if she thinks you deserve it," he added, smiling slightly. "Does she hit you?" I asked. Somehow it didn't seem right. Things were different now than they had been in my time, and the thought of Bella hitting her husband or one of her children was very unsettling. "No," he said. "She saved it for you." She never even raised her voice in anger at me. She can fool children around her little finger. I know it should be the other way around, but they just adore her. As I smiled at him. Then he tried to take a sip of the amber liquid in his glass. It burned. I coughed and my eyes watered. "What the hell is this?" I asked, coughing even more. "This, my boy, is a 12-year-old malt. It's an acquired taste. Sorry, but I don't think I'll buy it anytime soon. Do you have any beer?" He laughed and went into the kitchen to get me a beer. He threw the mug on the table and then put the bottle down. By this time, Bella had returned and entered the room. She sat down opposite me and glared at me. "Okay, tell me," was all she said, and I told you. It felt incredibly good to put everything out there. I thought I would feel embarrassed telling them about the changes in our sex life, but I started talking and couldn't stop if they asked me. Everything just poured out. "Can I ask?" Bella said softly when I finished my story. "Was she your first?" I lowered my head, embarrassed, but nodded. "What are you gonna do?" asked Jonathan. "You still don't know for sure what's going on between this Danforth guy and Stephanie?" I looked at him in surprise. "He means legally," Bella said. "I'm guessing you're thinking of divorcing this bitch, which means you need to activate the prenuptial agreement, which means you need proof." Jonathan nodded. "If you think they were having sex in your bedroom, the easiest thing to do is install a surveillance camera there." He stood up and went to his office, then returned with a small device. "Hide it somewhere with a good view of the room. It's motion-activated and records up to 72 hours of video on the included SD card. I guess the most logical time for them to do bad things is when you're here. So maybe you'll get the proof you need next weekend." "And one more thing," Bella added. "Remember that I know you, Simon. Don't get into any physical conflict with any of them." Jonathan looked at us. He had never seen me even slightly annoyed, so this surprised him. "Simon had anger problems as a child," she explained. "He doesn't have a problem with it now, but something like this might wake him up again." "She's right," said Jonathan. "If you fight him, you will most likely end up in prison and lose everything. Do everything right, and you will come out of the situation in acceptable shape." I nodded to them, and then Jonathan showed me in detail how to set up and test the camera before I headed home. Luckily, I installed the camera as soon as I arrived home. I set it up in the bedroom while Stephanie was at work and tested it. It worked great and was completely invisible unless you knew what to look for. I then went into the workshop for the last couple of hours before closing. When I got home, Stephanie was waiting for me in the living room. "Go take a shower and then come back here. We need to talk," she said. I was in no hurry to get into the shower. I didn't want to start this conversation, and I wished I had another camera to put in the living room. I decided to open up a video app on my phone so I could capture something if she was going to confess to anything tonight. As I approached the living room, I heard voices and saw that while I was in the shower, Danforth had arrived. They were sitting on the sofa with their backs to me. I quietly placed the phone on the sideboard, hoping it wouldn't be noticed. I walked across the living room and sat down in the chair opposite this couple. Stephanie placed the beer in front of my chair, and I took it and took a long sip. I felt that I would need it. "Simon," Stephanie said, "what you did last night was incredibly rude. I think you owe Danforth an apology." "Is it true?" I said in an even voice. "I do not understand why." You clearly didn't need me there. Why should I stay? You were the one who insisted on inviting him to dinner, she insisted. Why did you leave like that? Danforth simply looked at me, with a smug expression on his face. Maybe because I no longer wanted to spend the evening with my wife's lover, I said without raising my voice. It seemed to strike a nerve. I knew about them, but they didn't know that I was aware of it, and that changed things. So he finally figured it out. It took him quite a long time. I trusted you, and you betrayed everything we had. And now, it's all over between us. Oh no, said Asshole. We are far from finished. You see, Stephanie and I have an agreement. I need a business partner. I don't understand what this has to do with me, said. Because my wife will divorce me, and I will lose access to all her money, he said. And besides, it's so much fun. Cuckold a loser like you. I thought you weren't married? I said, looking at Stephanie. She laughed. Do you think he would have brought her with him? For her to see him and me together? So you did this to Mike, too? I asked. At the end of the day, Mike was a good little asshole. I had to persuade him, but in the end he calmed down. Just like you, he said. There's no need to make a big deal out of it, Stephanie said. If you play ball, we can continue as is. Small changes in the bedroom, and no one has to know. I will know, I said. And his wife will know, because I will tell her. You will do what you are told, he growled. I took another long sip of my beer, fighting the urge to break the bottle over his head. I think I'm done, I said. I'll take my things and leave. I'll say hi to your wife when I see her. Stephanie, I'll ask Jonathan, contact your lawyer. I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. To your Evie flashed through my head again. I tried to get up, but immediately lost consciousness. Then I heard voices. Damn, Steph, how much did you give him? The same amount we used on Mike. It's not nearly as big. You'll be lucky if he doesn't get poisoned. Oh, he'll be fine. He might need a little more time to recover, that's all. I felt a hand on my neck, probing pulse. I think you're right. I need a beer. They left the room. It took me a while to come to my senses. My head was throbbing. I was tired. I checked the ropes. I couldn't budge them. I tried to rock the chair, but it was a solid old chair that didn't move either. I looked around the room and looked up at the place where I installed the camera. I could make it out, so I was pleased. If they didn't kill me, which I doubted, I would have all the evidence I needed. I might have to watch Shithead have sex with Stephanie, but since I'm already divorced from her in my head, I can handle it. I didn't understand why they needed me at all. She could be with Shithead without his wife knowing, and without my presence. It seemed to me that they were just trying to gain power. They needed someone to dominate in the relationship. They were sick in the heed. I woke up with the mother and father of all Hedicus. The room was dark, and I heard regular beeps. Being the genius I am, I decided that I was in a hospital. When I tried to raise my hand, I found that it was handcuffed to the edge of the bed. This was not good. A face appeared in my field of vision. Bella. Well, finally, she said. It's high time you woke up. Oh, him, I croaked. She brought the ice chips to my lips, and I sucked them into my mouth, immediately easing my throat. I asked for another one and got that too. How long have I been here? I asked. 3 days, she answered. What's happened? I asked. That's what we've been waiting to ask you, she said. The story that your wife and her lover told the police is pure fantasy, but they claim you attacked them, so you're under arrest until the sheriff can sort this out. My phone should be in the living room of the house, and the camera Jonathan gave me is on the top shelf of the dressing table in the bedroom. Do you think you can reach them? I asked. She nodded. I'll tell you that you need clothes. Stephanie keeps watch outside. This is a shit show. His wife is here demanding to know what happened. She chuckled. What did they say happened? They said you came home and found them in bed together. You attacked him. She laughed a little at that. I knew that you were a savage, but I didn't think that even you were capable of such a thing. Oh, but the circumstances were completely different. Did they take my blood when I arrived? I asked, and she nodded. Ask Jonathan insists that she be tested for illegal substances. and take these things out of my house," I said. At that moment, the nurse came in and told Bella that I was too nervous and needed to rest. She pressed a button on the device next to the bed, and I felt drowsy again. I was awakened by someone raising my hand. Looking down, I saw a man in uniform. It looked like he was taking off the handcuffs. "What?" I said meaningfully. "Take it easy, Simon. I just needed to take them off. Your sister took your phone and camera from the house. Jonathan showed us the evidence. You are no longer under arrest. As for the other two," he smiled grimly, "I have a new use for them," he said, turning them on his finger. It took almost 2 weeks before I could sleep properly. I sat in bed waiting for a visit, Jonathan and Bella, when there was a knock on my door. Standing there was a beautiful woman, probably about 30 years old. "Hello?" I said. "Hello," she said. "My name is Lily Evans. I am the wife of Danforth Evans. Can I come in?" "I'm not sure," I began. "Please," she said. "I'm not here to cause you trouble or harm. I just wanted to talk." I pointed to a chair next to my bed, and she sat down on it. "I finally heard the truth about what happened," she said. "I'm so sorry he put you through that." I looked at her, wondering why she had come. Had she really come to ask for leniency for her husband? Can she tell me? He's a good man and the kids need a father. Well, if so, then she's out of luck. I wanted to hang that bastard out to dry. "Sorry for being rude," I said. "But why are you here?" She looked at me, and I'm sure she read my mind. "You think I'm here to speak in his defense?" she asked. This couldn't be further from the truth, but I'm here to defend mine. "I don't understand," I said. "Your brother-in-law told me that he intends to recover significant compensation from Danforth for what he did to you. But the thing is, Danforth doesn't own anything. After the divorce, which, by the way, has already been filed, he will be lucky if he leaves with his own skin. But since we were married at the time of the attack, the lawsuit will be filed against us as a couple. More precisely, against me. Don't get me wrong," she said. "I have money, not a fortune, but enough to live a reasonable life and raise children. But if you take it away from me, you will punish me and my children for what we didn't do. It won't be worse for him, but it will be worse for us. Please, we didn't do anything to you. Please don't punish us for his crimes." She started crying, and I wanted to hug her and comfort her. At that moment, Jonathan and Bella entered the room. Jonathan frowned when he saw Lily sitting next to me. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Please leave." Snorting, she nodded, stood up and left. She looked back at me pleadingly as she walked through the door. "This is true?" I asked. "I need a little more information," he said. "Am I suing her and her children for what this crap did to me?" "And Stephanie?" "I was going to talk to you about filing civil suits against both of them. Was his wife somehow connected with what was happening? Did she know about this?" I asked. He shook his head. "No. We understand that he told her that he was opening a new business in the city. She said she would partially finance him if he found other partners. She could have fully financed him, but she tried to force him to do something himself." "Is it true that she filed for divorce?" He nodded. "Judging by the documents, he will leave with nothing." "Then why are we chasing her and her children? They have nothing to do with this." "Bella thought you would say that, but I should have registered an interest before filing for divorce, otherwise there would have been nothing to act against." "I take it you don't want to pursue her?" I shook my head. "I'm not going to take food out of children's mouths." "By the way, how are things going with Stephanie and the auto repair shop?" "Well," he said, "with proof that they made the marriage contract will come into force. This means you walk away with everything you currently own, which is 55% of the auto repair shop's shares, plus all your own savings. Obviously, we'll also seek compensation, but I don't think we'll get much out of her trust fund. It appears to be locked tightly. Her only assets outside of it are the house, her part of the auto repair shop, and her part of the financial business she started with her lover. I believe she owned 60% of this share." "Is this a viable business?" I asked. "It would be viable with the right people." If I owned it, I would hire someone to manage it and let him build it, with the option of buying it out as I went along, he replied. Fine, I definitely want this workshop. Realistically, I think we could expect to get both businesses and some equity from the house, he said. Let's do it, but don't go after Lily, I reminded him, and he nodded. With the help of video evidence and my testimony, Danforth Evans was indicted. He was sentenced to 15 years. Stephanie was sentenced the same way. She was sentenced to 10 years. The divorce took place 6 months later, and her lawyers agreed to transfer her share of both businesses and pay 50% of the value of the house. Jonathan said that this was the best offer we could get, and I agreed. One afternoon, I found Jonathan and told him that I needed to find a way to pay him for all his work. A quick glance at the contract is one thing, but he spent a significant amount of time on my behalf, and as a one-man band, he couldn't spend that time making money. He leaned over and invited me to do the same. I did this, and he slapped me on the head, smirking. Bella told me you would do this, and she told me what to do when you do. I rubbed my head sadly. My sister hits harder than you, I said. A month later, the business asset transfer papers from Stephanie finally arrived, and I decided to go look at this financial business and see if there was anything worthwhile there that could be salvaged. I was told that the business employs several people, but does not produce inspiring results. When I opened the door, I saw a man standing nose to nose with Lily Evans and shouting in her face, "Kiss my ass," he shouted. "You may have a stake in this business, but I'm the only one keeping it afloat. Until the senior partner comes and tells me otherwise, I will run this office my way." "Good morning," I said. He turned to face me. "Who the hell are you?" he asked. "Well, I could be a potential client with $1 million portfolio to invest. But I think I'd just take my business somewhere else," I said. He looked me up and down. Since I had just come from the auto repair shop, I was still wearing overalls, albeit clean ones, but still overalls, he said mockingly. "Nonsense. Do you have $1 million? I don't think you should shout at people like that," I remarked, "especially at a woman." "Well, you can just—" I raised an eyebrow at this, but Lily giggled. "I wouldn't recommend it," she said. "It didn't turn out very well for Danforth." He turned pale and looked from her to me. "You're the guy who—" "I'm the one who owns 60% of this business," I said, "which, as you so eloquently put it, makes me a senior partner, which means you are fired." "Fired." "You can't fire me," he said. "This business will go bust in one day." I shrugged. "I don't care," I said. "I don't need this." I pointed at Lily. "She doesn't need this. The only people who will suffer from you being a complete and utter asshole are the employees. It's you." "Me too," said a sad voice behind me. I turned around and saw a young woman sitting at the reception desk. "Sorry," I said. "I didn't see you there." "Who are you?" "I am nobody. And now, apparently, she's unemployed," she said, and a tear ran down her cheek. "Looks like I'll have to be a waitress again." "What are you doing here?" I asked Aunt. "I answer calls, open mail, make coffee," she said. "It's not much, but the hours and salary are better than a waitress, and it means I can be home with my daughter in the evening." I pursed my lips. "Okay, stay here for a minute." I turned to the annoying guy. "You, get out." He turned pale for a moment and began to strike a pose. I smiled. I think that solved everything. He left. I closed and locked the door behind him. "Lily, you, me, and—" I looked at the girl. "Monica," she said. "Monica," I continued, "we need to talk." "First," I said, looking at Monica, "where is that coffee you were talking about?" She began to rise. No, I said. "Just point it out. I'll bring it." She pointed to the coffee maker at the other end of the office. "Lily?" I asked. "Just black for me," she said. "Monica? Cream and sugar, please." With coffee in hand, I sat down with the ladies. "So," I said, "I know the percentages, but how much do we have in dollars?" The value of the business is about 250,000, which means your share is about 150,000, Lily said. What happens if we just leave, besides losing this share? I asked. We can't just leave. We have clients. Our solution will be to sell the business to other brokers. I did my research when I first found out about it, and we could have sold it quickly and gotten most, if not all, of our money back, she said. What about the offices here? I asked. They are rented for a year and have already been paid for. They will remain empty until the end of the lease term. So it's all that simple? Sell and leave? Quite, she said, if that's what you want to do. Do you have another option? I asked. We could try to hire someone to manage the office, she suggested. What do you know about financial planning? I asked. A little, she replied, shaking her head. Me too. I'm a mechanic. We can just set ourselves up for another one of the same assholes. I pointed to the door through which he left. If only, I said, turning to Monica. Can you do it? She smiled sadly and shook her head. I make appointments, answer calls, and make coffee. I nodded. Then it's decided. From now on, we are closing the office. You said you have potential buyers? I asked Lily. She nodded. Could you arrange this, please? She nodded again. I owe you at least this. I have never been able to thank you for withdrawing your lawsuit against us. I never had a claim against you, I said. It was a lawsuit against the your ex-husband. You and your children did nothing to me. She grinned. Shit, that's right. But I will be happy to organize the sale. I will let you know when the contracts are ready so your lawyer can review them. I turned to Monica. Now you, I said, won't you take a ride with me? She looked from me to Lily. Okay, she said nervously. It was only a 10-minute drive to the auto repair shop. I took her to the office. Desk, notebook, telephone, coffee maker. I pointed to each item. If you're interested, this is not a very powerful financial institution, but it is an honest, regular job, and you can stay home with your daughter in the evenings. The salary will be the same as what you received in your previous job, with a 10% increase. Oh, can you drive a car? I asked. I don't have a car, but I have a license, she answered. Fine. You may have to travel for parts, pick up or drop off customers whose cars are being serviced. We have a van that we use for parts and a car for customers. Obviously, there is no point in leaving it in the shop overnight, so you can take the machine home overnight and use it. As long as it is kept clean, I said. She looked around the office. When do I start? She asked, smiling. You're already late. Not the best start to the first day, I said, smiling to soften the edge of my words. Monica and I almost immediately found a common language. She was a year younger than me, and her daughter, Bethany, was an absolute joy. I suggested that on days when her mother couldn't look after Bethany, she could bring her to the store. She could sit with her mother in the office, watch something on her tablet, and also go with her mother to buy parts or even pick up and drop off clients. City residents did not mind having their child sit in a car seat behind them when being driven to or from the store. Once we set the precedent, it became the norm, and every day, Bethany accompanied her mother to work. We were careful to keep her out of the workshop, which is a dangerous place, but the office was quite safe and even much cleaner thanks to Monica's efforts. After months of dancing around each other, I was working up the courage to ask her out when Bethany, in childish fashion, put me to the test. I had to go out of town for a 2-day auto show. I was looking for a specific part for an old car and was reliably informed that there might be someone at the show who could help. But he came back, disappointed that he didn't have what I needed. I returned to the store mid-morning and went to the office to tell Monica I was back. Bethany raised her head when I entered the office, and with a ringing cry of, "Daddy!" she ran to hug me. Monica froze like a deer in headlights. I must say I was stunned myself, but I picked up the little package that needed attention and carried it back to her mother. "I'm so sorry," Monica said. "I don't know where this came from." I chuckled. "I think this is a hint," I said. "She tells me it's time for me to get off my ass and ask her mom out." Monica blushed, but looked at me calmly. So are you going? I think yes. But I'm not sure where she might want to go on such a date. Do you have any ideas? Movie? She asked. I winced internally, remembering my first date with Stephanie, but I didn't show it. Despite the past, the date went well, and almost a year later, Bethany was one of Monica's bridesmaids at our wedding. Two other notable events occurred. About 3 months after Monica and I started dating, the sheriff came to visit me. Apparently, Danforth's cellmate told authorities that Danforth admitted to him that Mike's death was not accidental. They were going to exhume his body and check it out. If the inmate's words were true, then Danforth and Stephanie faced very strong charges. Another incident happened the following week. Monica, Bethany, and I went to see Bella, Jonathan, and children. At some point during the weekend, I did something wrong, and Bella hit me on the head. I was going to laugh at this, but Monica didn't like it. "This is the last time you touch my man," she said coldly to Bella. I opened my mouth to speak, but Jonathan caught my eye and shook his head, indicating that I needed to stay out of this. Bella and Monica looked at each other like cats, ready to fight, and then, unbelievably, Bella backed down. "You're right," she told Monica. "This is not my place anymore." There was sadness in her voice. Monica hugged her. "It's okay, I'll look after him now," she said softly. And I realized that until that moment, Bella was still acting in my mother's place, a role she had taken on after Mom died. "Take care of him," Bella said, gently placing her hand on my cheek. "He deserves it. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.